This is a LSD, Cannabis and Tobacco Trip report by Creatus, posted to arrowwood.org on November 2, 2007. It was a cool summer night, and the air held a faint scent of pine and distant traffic. My friend Jay had invited a small group of about 10 people to his house for a bonfire in the backyard. The fire crackled, sending orange tongues of flame licking the night sky, and a circle of chairs and blankets formed a rough arena for conversation. Some of the people there lived drug-free lives, some were curious, and a few had already smoked a bowl of cannabis earlier in the evening. The weed had been shared in a communal pipe, its sweet earthy smoke drifting upward and mixing with the scent of the fire. A couple of cigarettes were also lit, the tobacco adding a thin, sharp edge to the haze. The atmosphere felt relaxed, the kind of relaxed that comes from warm bodies gathered around heat, the kind that makes the mind feel open to possibilities. The plan for the night had originally involved several ounces of magic mushrooms that were supposed to arrive in a small cooler. The group talked about the expected visual patterns, the gentle body high, the way the mushrooms would make the fire look like a living creature. As the minutes stretched, a text message arrived on Jay's phone. The mushrooms had not come through. Instead, a friend in the city had offered a supply of LSD. Some people expressed doubt. One of the sober friends asked, "Are we really going to trust a blotter that looks like cheap printer paper?" I felt a surge of anticipation. I had been waiting for a night like this for a long time, hoping that a strong psychedelic would push the ordinary into something extraordinary. I told myself that if the acid was potent, the night could become a story I would remember for the rest of my life. The LSD arrived in a small envelope, wrapped in a thin layer of foil. Inside were several shabby white blotters, each one printed with a small square of crude black lettering. The paper looked cheap, the edges uneven, the ink faded. The price was $20 per blotter, a steep sum for a piece of paper that promised a powerful journey. I examined the blotters, feeling the weight of the cost in my mind. I decided to purchase 2 of the largest squares, hoping that the larger surface would hold a higher dose. I placed the 2 blotters under my tongue. The moment the paper touched my tongue, I tasted a sharp bitterness that was unmistakably chemical. A jolt of electric anticipation ran through my body. The taste was a reminder that I was about to begin something serious. Around me, other people took their hits. Some took 1 blotter, others took 1.5, a few daring souls took 2.5. They placed the paper under their tongues, swallowed, and then returned to the fire, laughing and chatting as if nothing unusual was happening. The night air seemed to hum with a low vibration, as if the world itself was waiting for something to shift. About 30 minutes after I had taken the LSD, I felt a subtle pressure building in the pit of my stomach. It was not pain, but a feeling of energy gathering, like a spring ready to release. My heart beat a little faster, my smile widened, and a sense of contentment spread through my chest. I looked around at the faces lit by firelight and saw them glowing, eyes bright, mouths relaxed. The group was happy, excited, and the fire crackled louder, as if encouraging us. Then the physical sensation of the drug began to climb up my body. It is difficult to describe the physical high of LSD, but I will try. It felt as though I was floating just above the ground, a lightness that made my shoulders feel unburdened. At the same time, there was a pressure in my head, a gentle weight that pressed against my skull, and a similar pressure in my stomach that made me feel as though my insides were being gently stretched. The sensation grew steadily, like a tide rising higher and higher. My throat began to feel tight, a pressure that made speaking difficult. It reminded me of the intensity of an ecstasy come-up, the way the throat can feel constricted when the body is flooded with energy. I did not realize I was fully tripping until the feeling hit my face. A young man across the fire, someone I did not know well, was laughing loudly. He tried to keep his composure, his words stumbling out. "Must keep composure." He pointed at the opposite side of the fire and said, "The kids on the opposite side of the fire are being quiet." We all nodded, and a silence settled over the circle. It was not an awkward silence. It was a shared understanding that we were all experiencing something deep and unusual. The faces around me began to blur and melt, the edges of each person softening as if they were made of wax. Their skin took on a reddish hue, and strange tribal markings seemed to appear on their foreheads, patterns that I could not decipher. I glanced at a scab on my own arm. It seemed to breathe, to pulse, to swim in the dim firelight. A few of us decided to test the depth of our trip by moving inside Jay's house. As we stepped onto the grass, the world changed. The lawn looked like a cartoon, each blade of grass exaggerated, bright and sharply defined. Purple and green flowers sprouted in impossible colors, their petals shimmering with a contrast I had never seen before. The colors seemed to vibrate, each hue distinct and alive. Inside the house, we headed for the bathroom. The mirror reflected our faces, but they were no longer the faces we knew. They stretched, elongated, and melted together. My own eyes seemed to widen, my mouth to grow thin, my cheeks to flatten. It was unsettling, but also fascinating. The sight made us all laugh nervously, and we quickly returned to the fire, eager to feel the night's warmth again. Back at the fire, my mind began to dive into strange thoughts. I wondered if we were underwater, if the chair I was sitting on was moving through me, why Tuesday existed, why school existed, why we learn at all. The questions floated without answers, each one a bubble rising to the surface of my consciousness. A friend suggested that we go back inside for a while so he could play guitar while I listened. It had been about 2 hours since I had taken the LSD, and the trip was deepening. I walked into the living room where photographs hung on the walls. The pictures seemed to move slightly, the subjects blinking, yawning, turning their heads as if alive. I settled onto Jay's bed, the mattress soft and warm. My friend picked up his guitar and began to play. The music was intense and emotional. As each note resonated, waves of color seemed to rush from the corners of the room toward the source of the sound. The room itself breathed in sync with the melody, expanding and contracting, as if it were a living organism. The blue carpet under my feet glowed, its fibers shimmering with a light that reflected across the walls. My friend's face was illuminated with an inner light, his eyes bright, his expression serene. He played with a skill that made him seem like a deity of sound, each chord a thread weaving us together. I felt a deep connection to him, as if the music was a bridge between his mind and mine. When I looked at his hands, they seemed to glow, his fingers moving with a fluidity that made the guitar strings appear to melt and reform. His hair seemed to dissolve into the air, particles of light drifting upward. His whole body expanded and contracted with the rhythm, as though he were breathing the music. After a few minutes, the song ended, and he placed the guitar down gently. The room returned to its ordinary state, but the afterglow of his playing lingered in the air like a warm ember that refused to die. The room felt thicker, as if the walls themselves had taken on a hue of deep indigo that pulsed in time with my heartbeat. I inhaled the scent of the incense that Jay had lit earlier, a sweet resin that mixed with the faint smell of the tobacco cigarettes that lay scattered on the coffee table. I reached for one, pressed the ash into the ashtray, and lit it with a match that seemed to glow brighter than usual. The smoke curled upward and turned a shade of gold that reminded me of sunrise on a distant planet. I felt the nicotine slide down my throat, a familiar sting that anchored me to the present even as my mind floated farther away. I took a slow drag, feeling the heat of the flame on my lips, and exhaled a cloud that hung for a moment before dissipating. The smoke seemed to carry with it a whisper of thoughts that were not yet formed, a sense that something important was about to happen. The music had ended, but the vibration remained. My ears still rang with the resonance of the guitar strings, each note echoing in my chest like a gentle drum. My eyes, still adjusting to the dim light, caught the reflection of the firelight on the glass of water on the kitchen counter. The water seemed to ripple without any wind, as if a tiny current moved beneath its surface on its own accord. I sensed a shift in the room, a subtle rise in the temperature that made the skin on my arms tingle. My stomach, which had been humming with anticipation since the blotters had dissolved under my tongue, now felt like a low, steady drumbeat. It was a physical sensation that I could not name, but it told me that the peak was approaching. My thoughts began to accelerate, each one racing to the next like a series of fireworks that never quite finished exploding. I looked at Jay, who was leaning against the doorway, his eyes half closed, a faint smile playing on his lips. He raised his hand and offered me a small pipe filled with cannabis. The bowl was dark, the herb compacted tightly. I took the pipe, feeling the cool metal against my palm, and inhaled. The smoke entered my lungs with a sweet, earthy flavor that seemed to expand my chest. As I exhaled, a wave of calm washed over me, smoothing the edges of the rising anxiety that had begun to coil in my throat. The combination of nicotine and cannabis created a balance, a grounding that allowed the LSD to rise without pulling me under. The peak arrived like a sudden flood. My vision filled with colors that I could not name, bright and vivid, moving in slow, deliberate waves. The walls of the house seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that matched the fire outside. The fire itself turned a shade of blue that was not possible in any natural flame. The flames danced upward, forming shapes that resembled ancient symbols, spirals that reminded me of the eyes I had seen earlier in the woods. Each shape seemed to hold a story, a memory that I could not retrieve but felt familiar. My mind was a kaleidoscope of thoughts. I could hear the distant chatter of my friends around the fire, their voices muffled as if they were underwater. Their words came through as bubbles, each one popping with a soft sound. I tried to follow a particular conversation, but the bubbles merged and formed new patterns. I felt a deep sense of connection to each person, as if we were all part of a single organism. Their laughter was a drumbeat, their sighs a wind that brushed my skin. I began to notice the texture of the floor beneath my feet. The wooden boards felt like a living surface, each plank pulsing with a faint glow. When I stepped, the boards emitted a soft tone, a note that resonated in my chest. I walked slowly, listening to the music created by my steps, feeling the rhythm guide me deeper into the experience. The plateau settled in after the initial surge of visuals. The colors became steadier, the shapes more defined. I found myself sitting on the couch, the cushions molding to my body as if they were made of water. My hands rested on the armrest, and I could feel every fiber of the fabric, each thread a tiny river of sensation. I closed my eyes and let the internal light fill my mind. The light was not blinding. It was gentle, like the glow of a lantern in a dark hallway. It illuminated thoughts that had been hidden for years. I thought about my childhood, about the moments when I had felt small and powerless. The images came as clear as if I were watching a movie. I saw a younger version of myself standing in a schoolyard, watching other children play. I felt the sting of exclusion, the ache of wanting to belong. The light of the LSD seemed to soften those memories, turning the pain into a warm amber hue. I could see the edges of those memories blur, becoming part of a larger picture that included joy, curiosity, and the simple wonder of being alive. I turned my attention to the cannabis smoke still lingering in the room. It curled around the light, forming patterns that resembled clouds of thought. Each puff I took seemed to pull a thread of those memories into the present, allowing me to hold them without being overwhelmed. The nicotine from the cigarette gave me a sense of alertness, a clarity that helped me navigate the sea of images without drowning. The night outside grew deeper. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the dark sky. The stars above were bright, each one a pinprick of light that seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat. I felt my breath synchronize with the rhythm of the fire, inhaling the warm air, exhaling the cool night. The combination of fire, smoke, and light created a cocoon around me, a safe space where the intensity of the trip could unfold without fear. As the peak began to recede, the colors softened. The walls returned to their normal shade of gray, though a faint afterglow remained. The shapes that had danced across my vision settled into simple, familiar forms. The music of my steps faded, leaving only the natural creak of the house. My thoughts slowed, becoming more deliberate, more grounded. I opened my eyes fully and looked at Jay. He was still holding the pipe, a small smile on his face. He gestured toward the fire, and I understood that he wanted me to join the others outside. I rose from the couch, feeling my legs slightly wobbly, as if they were made of jelly. The floorboards beneath my feet still emitted a faint hum, but it was now a low, steady tone that reminded me of a heartbeat. Outside, the fire burned brighter than before, its flames reaching higher, casting long shadows that moved like living things. My friends gathered around, their faces illuminated by the firelight. Some were still holding cigarettes, others had rolled joints that emitted a sweet, piney smoke. I took a seat on a log near the fire, feeling the rough bark against my skin. The heat of the fire warmed my hands, and I could feel the sweat on my forehead evaporate into the night air. We spoke in low voices, sharing fragments of what we had seen, what we had felt. My words came out slow, each sentence deliberate. I told them about the eyes in the woods, about the ancient symbols that seemed to speak to me. They listened, nodding, their eyes reflecting the fire. One of them, a girl named Maya, offered me a small joint. I accepted, inhaled, and felt the familiar rush of cannabis, a gentle wave that settled over the intensity of the LSD, smoothing the edges once more. The plateau continued for several hours. The world felt both expansive and intimate. I could sense the wind rustling through the trees, each leaf a tiny whisper. I could hear the distant hoot of an owl, its call resonating in the night. My mind was still active, but the frantic racing had calmed into a steady flow, like a river moving over smooth stones. I felt a sense of unity with the environment, as if I were a part of the forest itself. During this time, I reflected on the purpose of the journey. I realized that the fear I had felt earlier in the woods when I imagined being attacked by unseen children was a manifestation of my own insecurities. The children represented the parts of myself that I had hidden, the parts that feared judgment. By confronting them, I was able to release that fear. The scream I had let out in the void, the moment when I felt I was dying, was a release of the old self, a shedding of the layers that no longer served me. The white void that surrounded me was not an end, but a space of potential, a blank canvas upon which new ideas could be drawn. I thought about the connection between the substances I had taken. The LSD opened the doors of perception, allowing me to see beyond the ordinary. The cannabis acted as a gentle guide, smoothing the path, preventing the experience from becoming too sharp. The nicotine gave me a thread of alertness, a grounding that kept me from drifting completely. Together they formed a balance, each playing a role in the unfolding of the night. As the night wore on, the fire began to die down. The flames lowered to a soft glow, the embers turning to a deep orange. My eyes grew heavy, but my mind remained clear. I felt a deep gratitude for the people around me, for the safe space they had created, for the music that had started it all. I realized that the music was not just sound. It was a conduit for emotion, a bridge that connected my inner world to the outer world. The guitar had become a living thing, its strings vibrating with the same energy that pulsed through the forest. When the fire finally sputtered out, we sat in the darkness, the night sky above us a blanket of stars. The silence was not empty. It was filled with the soft breathing of the earth, the distant chirp of crickets. I inhaled the cool night air, feeling the nicotine lingering in my lungs, the faint taste of cannabis on my tongue. My body was relaxed, my muscles loose, but my mind was still active, processing the images and insights that had come. The come down began gradually. The colors in my vision faded to their normal hues. The walls of the house returned to their ordinary gray, the firelight was gone, and the room was lit only by the pale glow of the street lamp outside. My thoughts slowed, becoming more ordinary, more grounded in everyday concerns. I felt a slight ache in my jaw from the earlier tension, a reminder that my body had been through a great stretch. My stomach, which had felt like a drum during the peak, now settled into a gentle, steady rhythm. I stood up, stretching my arms overhead, feeling the muscles in my back release. I walked to the kitchen, where Jay had left a glass of water on the counter. I drank it, feeling the cool liquid travel down my throat, washing away the lingering taste of smoke and ash. The water was refreshing, a simple pleasure that seemed profound after the intensity of the night. I returned to the living room and sat on the couch, my legs crossed, my hands resting on my knees. I looked around at the empty chairs, the discarded cigarettes, the empty pipe. The room felt quiet, but there was a sense of presence, as if the energy of the night still lingered in the corners. I thought about the symbols I had seen in the woods, the eyes that had appeared in different forms. I realized that they were not random. They represented a pattern of awareness, a reminder to look inward, to see beyond the surface. The after effects of the trip lingered for hours. My senses were heightened. The texture of the couch fabric felt like a map of tiny ridges. The taste of the water was crisp, each sip a small pleasure. The sound of the refrigerator humming in the background was a steady rhythm that I could follow. My mind, though returning to normal speed, still held a faint echo of the insights I had gained. I felt a calm confidence, a sense that I could face the challenges of daily life with a new perspective.